Hi, I'm Holly, and with my sister Heather, you're listening to Haunted Family Podcast, a weekly podcast about the paranormal, unsolved mysteries, and even some true crime.
And even.
I have been very excited about this episode.
For like the whole time we've been doing this podcast.
Yes. Because
She's wanted to do this. She's wanted to do this episode since like we started this podcast.
I have.
I'm surprised this wasn't our first episode.
Honestly, I kind of am too. I don't even remember what our first episode was, but I'm kind of surprised that it wasn't this one.
Probably something lame.
Probably. Now I'm just so excited because kind of this case, this, person kind of led us down our road to
both of us.
Right, towards criminology, towards this podcast. This is kind of the crime that, started it from being a mild obsession to, something bigger for us. I know that our listeners already know what the name of this case is because they've listened or they've read the title, but y'all, you still have to give it to me when I spring it on you. And I hope that if you're driving down the road listening to us, because I listen to podcasts while driving, or if you were washing dishes or whatever you're doing, I hope you get super excited. Actually, on a side note, before I jump into this, speaking of wherever you're listening to podcasts, in my shop, Cat Hair Glitter on Etsy right now, there is a throw pillow that says, "Let's cuddle and listen to podcasts."
Aww. You should have one that says, "Let's cuddle and record a podcast."
I will. I'll make that. But there's also one that says, "Let's cuddle and watch true crime documentaries."
I'm just saying, from our Instagram feed, I know that there are several couples who record together.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. I will make that tomorrow, and so probably by the time you are listening to this, that'll be in the shop too. So, but tonight we talk about Gary Leon Ridgeway.
Wait, who?
Who's more famously known as Green River Killer.
Yeah. And it was this case that first introduced me as a young child to a man named John Douglas. And I know that people in the true crime community, because I've seen it on Instagram, are just starting to discover John Douglas's books. And I love that because he has been underappreciated for so many years. But I almost applied to the FBI because of him. But I decided to be lame and stay in Kentucky and be close to my nieces.
What year was that he spoke on campus? 99? 2000?
I want to say probably 99. I was still in high school.
I was not a parent yet, so I'm thinking 99.
Yeah. He came to Moorhead to speak, and I drove up from Paintsville to see him, and we talked to him for quite a bit of time before he lectured, and it was amazing.
It was.
We got to talk to him about the JonBenet case. This was actually before he came in on the case. So
yeah, it was really great. I've mentioned before that I was a criminology minor at the time, and one of my professors had arranged to have him come and speak, and it was open to the entire campus, but of course, the criminology and sociology people who knew who he was, we were all super excited about it. And I actually got there 3 hours early to get front row center seats.
Yeah, I mean, that's how obsessed we are. I brought one of my books to have him autograph. I still got it. I totally fangirl over John Douglas. The man's mind is just... Whew.
Yeah. And we've mentioned it before in the Q&A episode that he is actually one of the reasons we got the name of this podcast, because he has a book called The Cases That Haunt Us. And so that's, one of the reasons that we became Haunted Family.
So if you're one of our listeners and you have not read one of John Douglas's books yet, start with Mindhunter.
It's definitely...
You will not be disappointed in his writing.
Yeah, you'll be hooked.
Actually, I think there's actually like a couple of TV shows now based on him.
Yeah, he was the detective. He wasn't the detective, but he was the person they based the detective on in Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah. Fascinating. If you like true crime, you'll love his books.
Yeah. But anyway, so
he worked this case.
He did. He worked this case.
He came up with the profile for this case.
He did. He also nearly died because of this case, but we'll get to all of that. So let's jump in. Gary Ridgeway was born February 18th, 1949 in Salt Lake City, Utah. He was the middle child of Mary and Thomas Ridgeway.
Listen, I bet Jan Brady is a serial killer.
Yeah, probably.
Those middle children. If we got middle children listening, I'm just joking. Don't kill me.
When you look back, not to, what am I trying to say? Not to explain away or blame anybody or anything for a serial killer's actions. And I don't ever want anybody to feel like I do that. But I was actually talking about this person, this whole case to Ernie today, and he said, well, it's nobody's fault. Don't blame the mom, don't blame society, don't blame the military on his actions. And I was like, well, that's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying that in serial killers' upbringing, a lot of them have the same factors. And that's where both of my degrees come in.
And it all sort of ties in to mold them into who they are.
Right. I mean, and I know
I'm very much it's a nature and a nurture.
Right. And I know that you can have twins raised in the same environment, and one goes off and does unspeakable things and the other one doesn't. And that is where nature versus nurture comes in. But
I think it's definitely a little bit of both.
It is. So you've got Gary Ridgeway, who was always an awkward child. He was a chronic bedwetter, and the mom was fanatically religious. And so when he would pee, she would scrub his penis, like even as he was an older child. And this totally messed with him, because when he got to pre-puberty, he was starting to have feelings, and he was repulsed at some of the feelings that he was having about his mother, and he was angry that she was doing it, and he was angry that it was happening, but he can't talk about it because that's just not the kind of environment that he was raised in. Then you've got the fact that he's dyslexic, which, if you've listened to us rant on here before, you know that Heather and I both are dyslexic. Me mildly, so I didn't know that I was dyslexic until we got my youngest diagnosed. What do they call it? Severe and profoundly dyslexic.
I was moderately dyslexic, and I don't actually remember how dysgraphic they.
Okay, so we just had we just had something catastrophic happen. Like, my computer just completely went dead. Like, completely dead. It wouldn't, like, it's plugged in and stuff, but it wouldn't start. And, like, I had to, like, restart the whole computer all over again. And thankfully, the program that we used pulled everything up. But then we were fighting over where we ended last and what we said last. And
then we started, and then Holly was like, go back to 10:30, Heather. And I'm like, what? We're still recording. And she's like, oh, are we? We are not, I've said this a billion times, we are not tech savvy podcasters.
we are not. That's probably why we don't have any sponsorship except us.
Hey, Cat Hair and Glitter pays me in t-shirts, so that rocks.
So, and where I was going with that is, being dyslexic is it's a struggle. Like, and it's not, if we have listeners who think that being dyslexic means that your letters are reversed, that's not it. That's actually just a infinitely small, like, marker of dyslexia.
I wish that was
like,
the only issue with dyslexia.
Oh, yeah. Like, see, with mine and my number issues, which is actually called dyscalculia, they would flip. They still do. Balancing my checkbook is fun. Anyway, numbers switch and they move around on me all the time. Like, I can, like, look at it and watch it happen. They, like, letters sometimes just, like, look like gibberish. They don't look like letters at all. Like, no shape, form, or fashion. It's just, being dyslexic is super hard.
It will not make you a serial.
And no, but I know that Emmy had a really shitty teacher in second grade.
I had a really crappy one in first grade, and I would love to dance on her grave. Sorry, I'm not usually one to hold a grudge, but she almost ruined knowledge for me.
Well, I mean, and that's how this one was with Emmy. And she was the only bad teacher that she's ever had. We've had fantastic, phenomenal people who've supported us all along our journey, except for that one who should not be teaching.
Actually, Holly told her that in a meeting with the school, that she should not be teaching.
Yeah. Yeah, I said all kinds. I almost did bad things that I would have regretted later. But anyway, I'm just saying that year, and how the teacher made her feel, and how the teacher projected onto her as being stupid and lazy and, worthless, and how the other kids reacted to that because they saw the teacher treating her like this, so therefore it must be true. But I mean, right?
Emmy is not. She's not stupid, and she's not lazy, despite the fact that she will lay in her bed and watch YouTube videos for hours on end. She's actually super intelligent.
A kid that could not read in second grade, and not only could she not read in second grade, they were going to hold her back. That's what the fight was about. But anyway, for somebody who was in such bad shape in second grade, she's a freshman in high school this year, and she's taken honors English. And she just came home and said, hey, we had our first honors English test today, and I got 110%.
This is a kid who went from not being able to read at all to reading above grade level in just a couple years.
Yeah, 2 years after the whole we're going to hold her back because she's lazy and dumb, she was on the academic team.
Yeah.
So,
Gary Ridgeway grew up in a different time.
He did. And he did not have the wonderful support of the teachers that Emmy had. And he was actually held back. And so I'm not saying that being dyslexic caused him to be a serial killer. I'm saying that he had a rough life already with his mom
Abusive.
being crazy and religious fanatical and sexually abusing him. You've got the fact that he's a dyslexic, so he's already feeling out of sorts about the fact that he knows he's different from all these other kids.
I remember the anxiety of, every day in grade school, especially first grade, where I had the teacher who paddled me every day for being dyslexic. So I could just imagine his, almost a time period again.
Yeah, I mean,
but it's still no excuse for what he did later in life. But it does help you build the psychological profile of why, what his sort of motivations were.
Right. So then when he's 16, he leads a 6-year-old boy into the woods and stabs him in the liver. The little boy survives. Thankfully, but none of this was warning signs to people. Bedwetting wasn't a warning sign. The severely struggling in school was not a sign, and stabbing people, nobody put it together that this kid needed help.
Somebody should have been a big old warning sign.
I mean, you would think.
I mean, bedwetting,
you would think.
Okay, but you stab somebody in the liver?
Yeah.
What's he gonna do next? Steal someone's cheese grater?
13. That's another story for another time.
A stupid criminal this evening.
Yeah. So he graduates in 1969 and he marries 19-year-old Claudia Craig. And he joins the Army. Or I'm sorry, he joins the Navy. I don't know why I said Army. And he goes to Vietnam. But while he's there, he is soliciting sex from sex workers, and he's not using any protection. So he gets gonorrhea. So he gets gonorrhea, and but he does not use protection after that. Like, he's mad, he's royally pissed off, but he doesn't stop.
But he's also not mad at the right person himself.
No, he's not mad at himself for not using protection. He's mad at her for giving him gonorrhea. But while he's gone, his wife is cheating on him, and no surprise, they end up divorcing.
This is wife one and divorce one.
Yes. So then he marries Marcia Winslow, his second wife. And she left him because she said that he wanted to choke her and have sex outside and in remote locations that eventually turn out to be dump sites.
That should also be a big old warning sign.
Yeah. But I mean, at this time, who is talking about their sex life? I mean, you're not going to say, hey, Karen, my husband likes to choke me and have sex with me outside and, in cemeteries and, down by the river. I mean, maybe people say that.
I don't know. I wasn't, alive then. Oh, actually, hold on.
Yeah, this is in the 80s. You were.
When did he marry this wife?
I'm not really for sure.
Okay, so I may have been alive. I may not have been alive.
Right, but I was alive. Later, gets married a third time. But before then, he starts killing.
They actually don't know when he started killing. So they just say generally the 80s. He probably started killing people before that then.
Well, I mean, he stabbed somebody at 16. So what do you think?
I think probably right around the time he got back from the Navy is when he actually started killing.
I would say if they kept records on sex workers in Vietnam, he probably killed there.
You're right.
But yeah.
They probably also did not keep records of women who disappeared.
Right. So they have no clue what his body count is. No clue. He doesn't know what his body count is. Generally, he just says
70-ish.
71.
It could be a whole lot higher.
And it probably is. He would pick up sex workers, he would pick up runaways, he would pick up transients, he would pick up people who nobody would miss. So they could be gone for a long period of time and nobody would come looking for them and nobody would tie him to them. He would drive his truck up and down the Pacific Highway South, pick up a girl, rape her, strangle her, and then dump her. He got his name, obviously, because he would dump them. The first few that they found were clustered together by the Green River. But he would also use the near the airport, woodland areas. He left a few in Portlandia. I know it's really just Portland, but I loved that show, Portlandia. So, and he would leave them in groups, like, several bodies at a time in one location so that it's easier for him to go back because he liked to have sex with his dead victims.
He was a necrophile. Now, I think it should be pointed out that Gary Ridgway is also the only U.S. serial killer that is in the top 10 of the world's most prolific serial killers. And he's at number 8 on that list. But
he's a bad dude.
I think that, well, actually, he's at number 8 because they just list the 49 confirmed. If they went by 71 that he claims, well, that he says, that he remembers, he'd be in 4th place, tied for 4th. But I mean, there's a very good chance that he could be the number 1 on that list because he's killed a lot of people. He's killed so many people that he's forgotten how many people he's killed.
But that's realistic. In my mind, when you've got like somebody like Bundy who could tell you the names of their victims, I always wondered how. You're not having a conversation with them before. So basically you're just going back and reading your own press clippings. So it makes more sense to me when a serial killer says, I don't freaking know how many people I killed. It was a lot. I believe that.
The guy who is in the number 1 spot has 138 proven victims and may have over 300 unconfirmed victims.
Yeah, where's he
Colombia, Ecuador, and Venezuela.
Ugh.
Almost every one of his victims was killed within a 7-year period, and they all ranged between 8 and 16 years old, and they were all street children. Yeah.
Aww. So, one thing about Gary Ridgway is that when he would strangle, he started out just manually strangling. But he started getting defensive wounds on him. So he would then resort to using ligatures. So, sometime in the 80s, they developed the Green River Task Force, which is what John Douglas worked on. And this case was so huge, and so many people worked on it. And of course, at that time, criminal profiling was a baby. Like, it was just getting off the ground. And John Douglas was the premier profiler. So everybody we watch on the news today talking about crimes and cases and killers, they owe their job. They owe it all, really, to John Douglas. But he had so many cases and was training that he got stress-induced encephalitis, which swelling of the brain, and he nearly died
working this case.
Yeah. So I get so angry at this part. Like, Gary Ridgeway was arrested in 1982 for soliciting sex workers. By 83, he was a suspect in these killings. 84, he failed his first polygraph, although they thought that he had passed it because a polygraph is not a exact
Listen,
science.
I've had to take polygraph tests before. Like, not because I was under investigation, but it was through work.
Mm-hmm. Heather's a serial killer.
Those things are crap. Just like my unprofessional opinion, they are crap.
Yeah. In 87, they actually took samples of his DNA. For the love of God, people, you've got somebody who is a suspect and who you have their DNA, and it still wasn't tested.
Listen, this is a recurring theme on our podcast where cases could have been solved so much faster if law enforcement, and this is no knock against law enforcement because I have a lot of friends who are cops, but if law enforcement would just not screw up. I mean, I understand they have a big job, but sometimes they miss the obvious.
And I know, like, in areas like we live, they're just, yes, they go to trainings, and EKU is awesome and has a wonderful criminology.
It's not enough
department, but it's not enough for the entire state. Like, we've got poor rural counties that if something major happened, I would be terrified because I don't know that it would get solved.
Well, I mean, we've got those murders in Bardstown that have still not been solved, and one of them is a cop. I don't know if our listeners have actually been following this, but mark my words, when this finally gets solved, all of those murders will be tied together.
In the police department.
And it will be somebody who worked for the Bardstown Police Office or a related law enforcement agency that was involved in the killings. Because somebody set up Officer Ellis. And it was someone who knew his schedule well. Sorry, that's my conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
I've been kind of following this case since he died, and it's just all too suspicious how all of those people were kind of interconnected.
Yeah. Oh, and don't worry, we're going to be talking about the case later. Not later today, but later.
Actually, I think on Oxygen or something like that, they're doing a multi-part special on one of the killings. So
cool.
I recommend watching it. I've heard good things about it. I don't have time to watch it, but
in February of 84, he wrote a letter to the police. But in true Gary Ridgeway fashion, because Gary would taint the crime scenes. He would pick up trash from like an area, cigarette butts, maybe letters, whatever. He would just pick up shit from places and dump them at the crime scene. He was smart.
He was smart. He was thinking ahead.
He was. And that's how he was one of the ways that he remained, free for so long. is, he kind of knew what, how they could catch him. And so he did not really leave any clues for himself, but he definitely steered them in different directions. And that's what he did with his letter. He gave some facts, but gave all kinds of bad facts. And so when John Douglas read the letter, of course, he was still recovering from his stress-induced encephalitis. He said, no, this isn't written by the killer. But it was. I mean, on a bright note, Gary Ridgway never reached out to the police again, so it's not like, this letter could have broken the case wide open. I mean, especially since they already had his DNA and he had already had a polygraph.
Yeah.
So at 85, he starts dating Judith Mawson. In 88, they get married. And in the biggest what the fuck that I believe I have ever read, she said that she saved, that because of her, she saved lives. Because she made him happy and he didn't have to go out and kill as much. And he only killed 3 people while they were married.
That she knows about.
That she knows about. I'm just like, what the fuck? But she did say that he would leave early in the mornings, saying that he was going to get overtime. So
I think that might just be her way of, I don't even know the word I'm looking for.
making herself feel better.
Yeah, in a roundabout way. Self-comfort, trying to, ease her mind about the fact that she was married to one of the most prolific serial killers the United States has ever known.
Yeah. I mean, she divorced him, but it was a year after he was arrested. I just still do not understand how somebody can be married to somebody and not suspect, at least in some way, that they're a serial killer.
How somebody can be so good at covering their tracks that their own spouse doesn't know. But we see that time and time again. I think in a lot of ways, the wives may suspect something. May not be murder, but they suspect that something is going on. But, denial.
That's a major denial.
I see. Looking at his picture, he looks like somebody I would think would be a serial killer. It's those beady eyes.
Yeah, but Bundy didn't look like a serial killer, and yet
Bundy looked like a serial killer to me.
He didn't. Bundy looked like a suave man to me.
Bundy looked like a serial killer to me. Because you know why he looked like a serial killer to me?
Why?
Because he had that charm about him. But that snake-like charm.
Yeah, but I know people with that snake-like charm that, as far as I know, there's no bodies under their house.
That they've not found yet. Because this is Eastern Kentucky, and cops are too busy trying to chase meth heads who are stealing cheese graters.
Again, we're talking about that later. So
I'm going to keep teasing our listeners with that. So there's absolutely no way that they don't listen to this podcast all the way through.
So anyway, speaking of Bundy weighed in on Gary Ridgway. Before he was caught, before the Green River Killer was caught, Ted Bundy said, watch fresh graves because he'll be back. If you see a dump site, keep your eye on it because he's going back and he's having sex with the corpses. And by golly, Bundy was right. And then again, that's not how they caught him either, although you would think that would be. So when John Douglas came up with the profile, he said that the killer would drive a conservative.
Okay. They actually had two profiles, but the first one was made after there was only like 4 or 5 victims, and it was not a very complete or thorough profile.
Right. So they said he would drive a conservative, older vehicle, average or slightly higher intelligence, divorced, low self-esteem, good physical condition, white, and still frequents prostitutes. It also said that he would be somewhere between mid-20s and early 30s. Well, in 82, when the first victims were found, he was 33. Honestly, when they came up with this profile, they thought that it would just be a matter of time and they would be able to find the person based on the profile. But they had thousands of suspects. I mean, I know I said, hey, he was a suspect in 83. But literally they had thousands of suspects. He was one of thousands. But based on this profile, they would rank the suspects high, medium, or low. And they gave it, alphabet system. So A, B, and C. Gary Ridgeway was an A-. So he fit almost every single item on this profile to a T.
I think, though, that he actually had a lower than average IQ for serial killers.
Right, which is also another weird thing about dyslexics, because they tend to have higher than average IQ.
But then again, I think he was only ever tested as a child, so I don't know if he had successfully overcame any of his dyslexia at the time that he was tested.
Right. I don't know, but dyslexics tend to think...
I think his IQ was like 80s. 82, 83.
Yeah. So, dyslexics tend to think not in a box, but very much outside of a box. They're global thinkers. So, as an example of what I'm saying is, I can't read a sewing pattern. So when I want to make something like a doll or whatever, I have to think about the shape of it and sketch out the shape and then cut it out. Like I can't, those details I can't seem to get. I can't there was something else I was going to say that is weird, but I can't. Give an example, Heather.
Actually, I was going to say that the average IQ for a serial killer is 84. Sorry, not 84. 94.
Mm-hmm.
Jeffrey Dahmer, surprisingly, 145.
That does not surprise me. I don't know why he comes across to me as extremely intelligent.
I think it would surprise most people.
Okay, so going back to the profile, the profile said that the killer would not plan to put his victims through some sort of ritual sexual act or body positioning, and that it's difficult to determine if the actual killer engaged in ritual sex. But Robert Keppel, a former investigator for the state attorney general and an expert on serial murders, believes that some of the victims attributed to Ridgeway show signs of being posed. So, I mean, there's that. There's also the offender, in all probability, has a prior criminal or psychological history and comes from a family background which includes marital discord between his mother and father, and in all probability was raised by a single parent. He was not raised by a single parent, but he did have a very authoritarian mother. That the killer would have either been burned by women or lied to to by women. Or
I think what his mom did was definitely being burned.
Yeah, or in some way making him feel like women can't be trusted. And I think this also kind of goes back to the sex worker in Vietnam that gave him gonorrhea.
Yeah, even though that was his own fault.
Right. The profile says that he would seek sex workers because he's not the type of individual who can hustle a woman in a bar. He doesn't have any fancy lines or speech, and is basically shy. Strong personal feelings of inadequacy, and having sex with those victims might be the initial aim at the subject. But when conversation turns to pay for play, this causes flashbacks and triggers him to murder. It is believed the profile concluded that possibly the subject is killing because the victims are not listening to his preaching regarding their activities or making fun of him or laughing at him in some way.
I'm glad I'm not a serial killer.
Me too. This is not the day and age to be a long-standing, uncaught serial killer. Because, I know Gary Ridgway was caught several years ago, but
I think with those DNA testing kits, we're going to see a lot more of these old cold cases being solved.
I agree.
And I applaud that. Even though I will probably never get that done, because now I'm afraid that I might have a serial killer in my family.
We probably do.
True.
Yeah. So, the most tragic thing I think about this episode is that, I like to talk about the victims and give them a name, but you've got 71 people. There's no way that we could talk about all 71 people, but he didn't who he murdered, he didn't have a preference for race or, hairstyle like Bundy did, or, he just didn't care. He was an equal opportunity murderer.
That's what made people so afraid of him, though.
That's true.
Even though, yes, he did primarily go after prostitutes, people were scared because he really didn't care about race or any of that. He was, and he was dumping bodies, willy-nilly. And
that's true. You've got Bundy, who clearly had a type and had, an age range that he preferred, but Ridgeway did not. I couldn't imagine, because, he was married 3 times, but he had girlfriends too. Could you imagine going through life like, oh yeah, my ex-boyfriend was Gary Ridgeway?
And look at the dates of some of these girls that disappeared. July 8th, 1982. July 17th, 1982. July 25th, 1982. Then August 1st, 1982, August 11th, August 12th, August 29th, September 15th, September 20th, September 26th, October 8th, October 9th, October 20th. He was really...
Yeah, he did not have a
cooling off period between his kills, really. He just... And I think that was another thing that made him so different.
Yeah.
He didn't so much follow a pattern like other.
Yeah, so in 2003, actually November 5th, 2003, Gary Ridgway pled guilty to 48 charges of aggravated first-degree murder. And by agreeing to that plea bargain, they spared him execution. So he gets life without the possibility of parole. He said that he had killed all of his victims in King County, Washington, and had just transported and dumped them to other locations. And I think the reason that they did that is because they thought they could later ping other bodies on him and get a death sentence from that.
Yeah.
But they did not. I'm sure that they could have. But also by this point, some of his victims were found as skeletons.
Yeah, there is actually numerous victims that he takes credit for that have still not been identified. They have, that's sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can just, I'm looking right now at the list, they can just give you date ranges. Died prior to 1983. Died sometime between December 1980 and January 1984. Died sometime between 1973 and 1993.
Can you even imagine? So, Ridgeway was placed in solitary confinement at Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla. I just love the name of that town.
If I ever move to Washington, which I never will,
I know, because Walla Walla. You guys tax Dr. Pepper.
I think it's just Seattle.
Still, I just cannot get on board with a state that taxes my caffeine. I know it's not caffeine that they're taxing, it's the sugar, but still. Glass of Dr. Pepper, 2 Excedrin migraines, 3 ibuprofen. That is my migraine cocktail and a hot shower. And if that doesn't work, then I have to take a prescription. So on May 14th, 2015, he was transferred to USP Florence in Cannon City, Colorado. But people flipped their shit and nobody wanted him there. So,
even other inmates are kind of scared of him. I mean, he murdered 70-some people. It's kind
of funny to me that, like, people weren't terrified to have Manson in their prison. And I know Manson didn't kill 71 girls, but Manson had this way about him that he could make people do shit that I don't know that Gary Ridgway was savvy enough to do. Like, I feel like Gary Ridgway in prison would be less of a threat than a whole lot of other people.
Yeah, I mean, unless there is a whole lot of female prostitutes in prison.
Right.
I mean, yes, I know that there are men in prison who kind of act as prostitutes for other males in prison, but I don't think Gary Ridgway ever showed any homosexual tendencies.
So
I mean, all of his victims are female.
In September 2015, so really just a few months after he got there, they transferred him back to Washington for so he could be easily accessible for any open murder investigations. He was transferred on October 24th, 2015. And he's still there.
Yeah. I was actually just reading the profile of one of the people that he is suspected of killing. A 17-year-old girl named Martha Morrison. And she disappeared. Oh, sorry. Her unidentified remains were found October 12th, 1974. And her remains were finally identified July 13th, 2015.
Poor girl.
I know.
And you know, I mean, that's what bugs me as a parent, is that these young girls are somebody's babies. You know, they are somebody's child. And nobody noticed them missing for so long. I can tell you that driving home from school the other day, Emmy sees this minivan, and I know the mom. She may or may not be listening to this podcast. If so, if she's listening, it's a hate listen, because she's probably going back and whispering to her friends that I have a scandalous podcast where I say bad words like fuck. But anyway.
We do have a scandalous podcast. And now we're talking about you.
This mom drives a minivan, and she's got like a bunch of decals on the back of her vehicle. You know,
Holly has no room to talk, though, because she has a ton of decals.
I do. I have my monogram. I have the Empire symbol from Star Wars. And I have, well, actually, my Kentucky sign is peeling off. And I have a Tennessee T. Those are the only decals I have. None of them are activities that none of them are tied to my kids in any way. But this woman's minivan.
Because if you put one tied to your children on your car, your kids would freak out and be like, you're making this victims of serial killers.
I'm surprised they haven't said that about the monogram yet. But anyway.
Or the Empire symbol. They're going to know what we are, Mom.
Yeah, and we're Sith, and they're going to back off. Anyway, so we see this minivan, and it's covered in decals of like every activity that her kids do. And Emmy said, God, Mom, she's so proud of her kids. If one of them smoked meth, she'd put a decal of a spoon on the back of her car. I feel like in this situation, though, that would be me. If my kids decided that they wanted to run away from home and be sex workers, I would be like, you be the best sex worker that you can be, but you better text me every evening so that I know that you are still alive.
Yeah. So Anthony has decided that this podcast has made me too paranoid. Okay. We went to pick up a forge table and blower tonight, for this evening, from a guy that his mom met online. He's, a local picker. He buys and trades and things. And we actually met him in one town and picked him up, and he rode in the back of the truck, in the back seat of the truck, to another location to pick it up. So we get there, and it's his brother's house. And we get out of the truck, and he says, come here around to the back. I want to show you something. Takes Anthony around to the back of the garage. And here I'm like, crap. This guy's going to kill Anthony. And I'm going to have to find something to stab his brother in the throat with. And after we leave, I'm telling him that. And he's like, that podcast has made you paranoid. He said, but I also thought that we might get murdered. And I was planning on how to kill that guy just in case I needed to try to escape.
Now, I know that our listeners do not know Anthony.
But no, I mean, nothing bad happened, and I mean, I'll probably end up buying and trading things with this guy in the future because, I mean, if he's got things I want, then
Anthony is like 6'4" and looks like he could take you down. Like, that would be stupid for somebody to try to kill him.
Especially because the guy weighed about maybe 140 and was maybe a little taller than me. So yeah, it would have been very bad for him to try, or his brother to try anything. But you never know in this day and age.
Somebody might try to steal your cheese grater.
Exactly. But no, so yeah. And it's not so much this podcast. It's people like Gary Ridgeway that makes me so paranoid.
People are evil. I mean, not everybody, But there are evil people in the world, and those evil people look like everybody else. Like, yes, we can say, oh yeah, Gary Ridgway looked like a serial killer. But let's not forget that Gary Ridgway walked around on this earth for 40 years not caught. He killed 70 some people and not, he was a prime suspect and was arrested twice. And not once did somebody say, you know what? He is the killer.
Actually, this week on our Instagram, I posted a picture and a little short thing about Chris Watts, the man who killed his wife and 2 daughters. And it has ended up being our most successful podcast post as far as impressions, likes, and profile views. But I was pointing out that I find it odd that everyone on my Facebook page is talking about how they just can't believe that evil like that exists in this world. And that somebody who, looks so perfectly normal would kill his wife and children. And I just want to scream at them, listen to my podcast. We talk about this all the time. There are actually a lot worse people in this world that's done a lot crazier, nastier, horribly cruel things. Because there's true evil in this world. And true evil is packaged up to look like your next door neighbor.
Right.
The guy who, brings you your mail. Or, stocks the shelves at your local Walmart.
It's...
You never really know what is lurking in someone else's mind.
It's craziest.
And that's what makes people like Gary Ridgway and like Ted Bundy and Chris Watts so... That's what really just shatters people's world when people like that hit the news. Because they're your average Joe next door neighbors. They look like you and me. Well, not you and me because we're both girls, but Green River Killer is one of those cases that I really was surprised they ever solved. And I know a lot of people was actually surprised that it ended up being one person. Because the murders happened at such a rapid pace. And the dump sites were scattered in such a way that so many people thought that it was actually the work of multiple people.
Well, I can see why. Because you don't ever imagine that somebody is capable of killing so many people in such a short period of time. I'm sure that the stress of these cops knowing that people are disappearing at a rate of one every couple of days.
Yeah, I could not imagine the stress that everybody in those police departments must have been feeling.
Yeah.
And especially looking back now and them seeing it through, hindsight, knowing that they could have caught him a lot sooner.
Yeah, but life is not an episode of Law and Order. We don't have an end. It all can't be wrapped up in an hour.
It's not Criminal Minds or whatever that FBI show on TV is, where it's all, so cut and dry, and they always get the bad guy in, at the end of the episode, and it's not. Real life is just not that way. And sometimes, the bad guy eludes you for decades before you finally get lucky and get what you need to finally make the arrest.
Yeah.
I hope that the cops that were alive, who, were kind of with this case from the beginning, all went out and bought each other a beer at the end of this when he finally was in prison. Because they deserved it.
Well, do you want to tell our listeners about the cheese grater?
I do. I really do. Okay. So, while I was out today, I was listening to the news in the car, in the truck, and I heard a news report. And it was literally the funniest thing I have ever heard in my life. The radio was staticky and I could barely hear it. So as soon as I got home, I had to look it up because what I thought I heard couldn't have been true. But what I heard was actually true. This happened in Floyd County, the next county over from us. Well, from me. Mason Tackett got a call saying that somebody was breaking into his house. So he drove up there, and in fact, his cousin was breaking into his house. Holly and I both know what it's like to have cousins who are on the wrong side of the law. Thankfully, they never stole from us, but they have stole from other family members before.
That was bad news.
Yeah. So he walks in on his cousin carrying items out of his house. And he said that his house looked like somebody was packing up for a yard sale. It was in such, dishevelment.
Yeah.
Okay, so, of course, Philip Higgins, the guy who was robbing him, did what most people do when they are confronted by the homeowner. He started lying. He threw his hands up in the air and started saying, I didn't do it. You know how rogues do. Blame it on everybody else.
Yeah. We have family members like that, too.
So Tackett went around to the back of his house, and that's when he saw things that his cousin was pulling out of his house. And Higgins got mad and pulled a gun on him.
Yeah, we also have family like that, too.
Yeah. But,
okay.
Let's get to the funny part of this. Some of the things that Mr. Higgins was stealing.
Weird. Okay, if you've got somebody breaking into your house, you imagine that they're going to steal your computers, your, iPads, your TV, your cheese grater.
Cheese grater? Yeah. He stole the cheese grater. He got the bottle of Lysol. He stole an empty spray bottle. He stole the soap.
Well, yeah, I got nothing. I don't know why.
Yeah. But Higgins was arrested and he has been charged with receiving stolen property and being a convicted felon in possession of a handgun. actually had a friend whose house was robbed a few
What?
weeks ago. And you know what they stole at her house? Smoked sausage and her makeup. Among other things. But smoked sausage and her makeup.
The funny thing is that since Abby and Hannah left, they come back all the time. Like, Emmy jokes that this is their awkward amount of time house. That, whenever they've got time that they don't want to drive back to where they live, they just hang out here. And so I will come home and, like, hamburgers will have been fried on the stove, or, like, various other, like, there'll be like a bowl in the living room, or I don't know that I would even notice if my cheese grater went missing. Honestly, if something like that went missing, I would just assume that, like, a ghost did something with it.
Okay, so, I mentioned on Facebook that I would miss my cheese grater. I have a confession, y'all. Well, I do only buy block cheese and grate it down myself.
What?
I use a food processor for that. Ain't nobody got time to stay in there with a cheese grater. I just whiz to the food processor and I got grated cheese. But yeah, so I just want to warn our listeners, be careful, because there's cheese grater thieves out there. And they'll steal soap too.
If he used the soap, I would give it to him.
A social worker friend of mine commented, and she was like, so at first I thought that maybe he was just having issues meeting his basic needs, because, he also stole razors, soap, razors, but a cheese grater?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, so we got a message this week that people are having trouble finding us on YouTube. So I am going...
Because until we reach 1,000 subscribers, we can't have a really awesome custom URL for YouTube, which makes us easier to find. It's a slippery slope,
yeah.
Boo,
so
YouTube.
I'm going to put a link to it in our show notes. So go to our YouTube, follow the link, go to our YouTube, and subscribe so we can get 1,000 subscribers and we can have a custom link.
And when we finally do hit 1,000 subscribers, we are going to celebrate by giving you all a present. Well, not all of you, but one lucky listener and subscriber will receive a prize bundle of awesome goodies from our shop.
And if you just want to check out my shop and, I don't know, maybe buy something because everything in it is pretty awesome. I obviously need a new computer.
She needs a new computer.
You can find me at Etsy, and it is Cat Hair Glitter.
She's got cute stuff, not just true crime and alien and paranormal related, but she's just got like cute stuff. It's fall and football season, and she's got lots of fall and football season stuff. And
yeah, I do. Pretty much the shop is everything that you will find in my closet, because I make all my own stuff, and I make all of Emmy's stuff, and I make everybody's stuff. It started because Abby did cheerleading, and I was spending a lot of money at our local shop here, and the quality was going downhill. And so I knew I wanted to start doing something. And then when she left cheering and she started doing band, you can't find anything band related. So I started making my own with vinyl. And then from vinyl, I moved on to this other process that makes it permanent on the shirt. And I just I mean, it just kind of snowballed from that. So literally every design that you see in the shop is either something that my kids have specifically asked for and they've got two completely different tastes, or it's something that, like I really wanted, or something. So I mean, it's, when I say it's my closet, it really is. A new item that it just kind of popped into my head, and I love it. And I actually had that shirt on today. People who wear Bible verses and stuff on their shirts. Specifically the is it Psalm 31:25? Like, she is, well, let me look at my shirt.
I don't know.
It is Psalms 24:7. No, shit. It's not 24:7. That's what I made it. Anyway, I think it's 31:25. So I rearranged all of that to make a shirt that says, she is clothed with leggings and tees and naps without fear of the future. Probably me, 24/7. Also Abby. Yeah, actually I had to make Abby one too.
Also Abby.
I love this shirt, and it is so me, and I wear it all the time. Of course, I was trying to read it upside down because I'm wearing it. But that is just an example of something I have in my shop. And then, like I said, I just added some throw pillows today. But I can really customize anything for you. So if you don't see something, message me. I'm happy to, whip something up. And if you use our code haunted, you get 10% off, I think. So I mean, there's that. I know, that's almost like getting your taxes paid.
Everybody likes 10% off.
Like the tax on the item, not, like your house taxes. Yeah, I can't pay that. I'm sorry.
Not however much you owe the IRS. Yeah.
No.
We are not that generous of podcasters.
No, we're not.
We are not making My Favorite Murder money.
No,
we are not even making.
We are not doing that either.
Paying our hosting fee money.
We are.
But we are having so much fun with you all every week.
So yes, I will drop a link to our YouTube in the show notes. I will drop a link to my shop in the show notes. Find us on Instagram because we're pretty active there. We're pretty funny.
And we're pretty funny there.
Yep.
I post
we're
a couple times a day at
podcast
least.
On everything. And if you've got a stupid criminal, send it to us, hauntedfamilypodcast@gmail.com. We absolutely want to hear your stupid criminals.
Yeah. Especially if it involves stolen cheese grater.
Or something similar. If you have an idea for a show, we want to hear that too. We are super laid back and extremely flexible. So hit us up.
Well, I'm not really flexible. Sometimes I have trouble tying my shoes.
Not that kind of flexible. Anyway, thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.